hired to act, but they don't really have connections at all. Now, obviously, when talking about these cells, this all exists on a spectrum, so it's really impossible to often pinpoint, well, this is chain of command, this is guided, this is self-starter. But one thing we can comfortably generalize is groups that have more connections generally have less resiliency because connections mean that security services can find them. They also have more capacity because they've had training and they have resources. Groups that are generally self-starters, well, they're going to probably have more resiliency because they're harder to find. It might just be a group of guys who've gotten together, but they're going to have less capacity, i.e. they're going to have less experience, less training, less resources to actually carry out attacks. So those are some of the trade-offs that are happening. The second point I want to come to is where recruitment is occurring. And I'm going to just speak broadly on two main areas. First, places that people congregate. Second, places that people feel vulnerable. This is pretty much common sense.
Whereas the alternate, the de-radicalization process, is another process of relative change within religious movements per se, one in which a radical group reverses its ideology and delegitimizes the use of violent methods to achieve political goals, while also moving towards an acceptance of gradual social, political, and economic changes within a pluralist context. So, primarily, we are talking about de-radicalization at three levels: ideological, behavioral, as well as organizational. When we say ideological, we are basically talking about any group as such, whether it is religious or any other radical group, which undergoes a de-radicalization process that does not have to ideologically abide by democratic principles, whether electoral or liberal, and does not have to participate in an electoral process. However, it primarily concerns itself with changing the attitudes of armed religious movements towards violence, rather than towards democracy, for example, from jihadi to non-jihadi sentiment, and possibly accepting different perspectives, moving on to democracy. Many de-radicalized groups still uphold xenophobic as well as anti-democratic views. However, this is one approach towards de-radicalization. At the behavioral level, de-radicalization would mean practically abandoning the use of violence to achieve political goals without a concurrent process of ideological delegitimization of violence. Whereas at the third level, the organizational, this is which becomes very obvious, that is the dismantlement of the armed units of the organization, which includes discharging, demobilizing, disarming their members without splits, mutiny, or internal violence. Because a lot of times when these groups are divided or they are targeted, they may bifurcate or they may divide into smaller groups with relative agendas of their own.
I should say also that terrorist organizations do end. There's always a cycle of violence, but terrorism as such, I do not think will end. Somebody mentioned here earlier that we'll have a lot of angry young men around there, and women as well, or frustrated and grieved young men and women. And thank God for that. I mean, I would really hate to live in society without any angry young women and men. That just the development and I think healthiness of society. The question is just how you channel that frustration and so that it doesn't go into violent means. Groups have ended. Al-Qaeda might end at some point. Groups have been made illegal. New ones have appeared. Some say by making some groups illegal, you're actually mushrooming the number of groups, etc. So there's a whole debate around that. There's also the question of some groups end where collectively, unilaterally, groups end themselves, where the leaders actually go in and say, listen, we've had enough. The Egyptian example is an example, a case in point there. And then you have individual disengagements where individuals go out and say we've had enough for a number of different reasons. Either they are, and we can go through the reasons why specifically individuals choose to end terrorism or go out of exit terrorism, because I think that's a very interesting case study, if you like. We've seen people leaving terrorism because of disillusionment with leaders, disillusionment with the group, that the aims of the group were not met, that all the promises and the glory of a terrorist group were not met at all. You've seen people leave terrorist groups because of change of lifestyle. People leave when they get married, for instance. That's one of the cases that we've seen in a number of examples. They see there are other values which might be important. They've seen that the solidarity of the group is also an issue where the solidarity is not as strong as one might have thought of. So there are different aspects here as well. Disillusionment with the aims I mentioned, that it wasn't as rosy, and it wasn't as easy as one might have thought. A friend of mine always says that, a friend, I should say, a colleague, point of contact, who's been, I'll explain you why. Because he used to be part of a terrorist group, and he came out, and that's why I'm saying, point of contact and interviewing. He told me that being a terrorist is actually really rough. It's hard work, It's not like the glorious life of a wannabe martyr. It's also really tough, and it drains you, and it's hard. And this is something, which a lot of people, when they look forward to, the life as someone fighting, doing what young men do, or becoming a martyr, like it's glorified, people say, but it's not really. It's really hard work when you really have. So that's, just explaining that that's also a reason when people realize how hard it is, people actually do leave as well.